welcome to another episode of Jets Mailbag. I'm your host, Jeane Coakley, and I'm joined by my co-host for this and every episode, the one, the only, Connor Hughes. Connor, how are you? Are you tired? Are you well rested? How's the
This has been a
driving?
grind. I, I,
I
I
know.
would say this we're on a grind stretch of the season. This is where covering both teams, the Giants and Jets, has the negativity, and I don't want to. I'm not going to be one of the people that comes out and complains about this job in any way, shape, or form. I know the whole thing went over recently about like holidays and working on Christmas and Thanksgiving and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I remember I saw some of that, and what went through my head is just like, Janae, our job is to watch football and
I
then
know.
write and talk about it. Like that's what I do for a
Like,
living.
Connor,
So
we
like,
get paid to watch and talk football. Like, we get
yeah,
paid to watch and talk football at the
yeah.
end of the day.
Every day I wake up and I'm worried that somebody's going to realize like this should not be a job. Why are we paying you to do this? Like this is ridiculous. So it's every day. It's a pinch myself moment. I genuinely do love what I do.
Well, you know what? We get to talk about the Jets and win because they won their third game this season, beating the Falcons
Third in five
27
weeks. Third
24.
in 5 weeks. The Red Hot Jets.
Look at that. Look at that. So all's good. So with that, we're going to do a 2-for-1. All right.
Cool.
So this comes from Rob. If the Jets win one, two more games, and they're in the 4-7 range, do you think it's more likely they go best player available or trade up for a QB? On top of, so this is the Joey. Joey asks, do the Jets still eye Mendoza after winning some games? Are they giving up more capital to get him by doing so? So we're at the draft. We're at how many games are they going to win, and what are they going to do?
Yeah, I keep saying this over and over and over again. This quarterback class isn't ridiculously robust. It's not like the ones where you're like, even just a couple years ago when it's Caleb, it's Jaden, it's Drake, it's JJ, it's Penix, like where they were basically 6, 7, 8, 9 quarterbacks where you could all look at and be like, yeah, those guys definitely deserving of top 15 picks. And because they're quarterbacks, they're probably going to go even higher than that. It isn't that caliber of a draft, but it's also not like the one we saw when Kenny Pickett came out, where it was like, oh my God, none of these guys are first round picks. And you basically see the quarterback go one, and then you don't, or in the first round in Pickett, which was even a late first round pick to the Steelers, and then you don't see another one for like 3 rounds. It's nothing like that. Mendoza is not an elite prospect. Simpson's not an elite level prospect, but they are quarterbacks that should be going in the first round, and they are first round quarterbacks. So I very much disagree with this notion that the Jets can simply punt on the quarterback until 2027. I don't think that's something that they can do. You are running such a risk in ownership patience lasting that long. You're suddenly going to kick the can down the line. You're going to get stuck in a situation, lesser extent, but similar to Brian Dable, where he's got the 3 years, finally gets a quarterback, doesn't win right away, throws it. It's just, there's so much that can happen between now and then. Also, the evaluations of a 2027 quarterback class, which is believed to be pretty good, changing. And suddenly guys don't look as good as they look right now. So I just don't think the Jets can afford to wait until 2027. If they like somebody this year, they're going to do whatever they can to get it. And one of the benefits of them trading Quinnen and the benefits of them trading Sauce was they recouped the draft capital, where if they need to make a run to go up there and get a quarterback, and they need to move up from, if they're picking 7, 8, 9, 10, 4, 5, 6, anywhere in that range, they have the ammunition to do that without completely and totally depleting themselves moving forward. So, no, I think that they're still in a very good position right now to go up and get the quarterback. And I do think in a perfect world, they draft him organically. But this isn't where they're going to take the corner, the interior defensive lineman, the receiver, and just punt on the quarterback. I really struggle seeing that. I genuinely do believe the Jets are going to find a way to get their quarterback in the first round this year, whether that's by trading up or taking him naturally.
Okay, well, this leads right into the next 2-for-1 questions. We're going to stick with the quarterback situation, as you're probably well aware of. All right, this comes from Mark D. You kind of sort of answered this. Do you think Taylor would be worth keeping until 2027 when we can go for a quarterback? Leading into Matthew, who says, who are potential targets and free agent if Tyrod doesn't get the nod? If we sign a mid guy like Tyrod, Kirk Cousins, do we wait to draft a QB? Thoughts on Marcus Mariota? So pretty much basically, like you answered, you think they should go 2026, and who is the backup? Or what do you do with Tyrod?
So the interesting thing about Tyrod is that he's not the player that he's been. I've been covering the Giants the last 4 years in addition to the Jets, and Taylor was Danny DeVito, or not Danny DeVito, Tommy DeVito, and
That's
yeah,
Eli
probably Danny
Manning's
DeVito's
friend.
backup too. Yeah, right. He was Tommy DeVito, Daniel Jones's backup for a couple years there, and you got a chance to see him play a handful of games there with the Giants in 2023. Went 2-3 as a starter. The quarterback that you saw that year physically looked supremely different from the quarterback you're seeing for the Jets right now. The arm strength and zip isn't near what it was even 2 or 3 years ago for Taylor. He can still run and move around within the pocket, but he's not as elusive or as fast as he was. He's clearly a quarterback now that at one point you could call him the 33rd or 34th starter in the NFL because of where he ranked among the backups and the caliber of quarterback that he was. I think now he's probably a middle tier backup quarterback. But when you're comparing him to everybody else and what you get as a leader and what you get as a locker room presence and what you get in the experience aspect of it, I do believe that Taylor throughout the rest of the season can play himself into a position where he is the Jets backup quarterback next year, or the bridge starter for whatever rookie they end up drafting until that rookie is ready. And honestly, Jeane, I don't personally love the guys that are out there in free agency. In fact, this game that they played against the Falcons, I was really interested in watching it because I wanted to see Kirk Cousins, because this was a quarterback and a veteran that I think he'll end up being there. I think he's a guy that wants to continue his career, and I thought he could be that bridge option for the Jets. Kirk Cousins is shot. There is no arm strength. There's no zip. There was never a lot of mobility, and now there's even less. I wouldn't touch that at all. Marcus Mariota, absolutely the best free agent option that's probably going to be there. Still limited, but you can see what he's doing now with Kingsbury and in place of Jaden Daniels with the Commanders, that the guy can still play a little bit, has some zip, has some mobility, really, really good guy. Like Tyrod Taylor, he's a great human being and somebody that players like. So I like that option. Some other names that stand out to me, and this is not from talking to Jet sources and know they're going to target him. This is just my personal opinion. I think Jimmy Garoppolo could work really well within this Tanner Engstrand offense, the what he wants to do with the quick firing and things of that nature. I think he could work pretty well. Like the idea of Gardner Minshew as well, a little bit more excitement there. And then Sam Howell, I wouldn't rule out either. I think he could be an option. But if you're throwing Tyrod Taylor into the mix of those guys, I'd probably say Mariota 1, Taylor 2, Jimmy 3, and then the other guys are significant consolation prizes that aren't all that great. But if Mariota prices himself out of what the Jets want to do, or somebody's going to give him a little bit of a longer leash because of how he's been playing recently for the Commanders, then I think the Jets could go to a Jimmy G or Tyrod option. But I think Tyrod's a pretty good, could very well factor into the equation here and be a situation for the Jets, especially these final few weeks of the season where he plays himself into that role.
Okay, well, this leads right into Chris Davidson's question. Who's going to develop our franchise quarterback if we find one?
It would be Tanner. That's your guy. That's Tanner Engstrand. That's one of the reasons why you brought him in there. And I remember talking to some coaches about Tanner after the Jets had hired him, and there wasn't a ton known about him because he's kind of been in that Detroit Lions ecosystem for a while. Was supplanted by Ben Johnson when he went over there, and Ben Johnson got all the credit. And then when Johnson didn't take him with him to Chicago, you wondered, well, is he actually worth anything? I've been pleasantly surprised with Engstrand. There's absolutely things he could do better. There are moments in games where you wonder, but he's a first-time NFL play caller and a first-time NFL offensive coordinator who's learning a bit on the job like anybody else. So I think there's been a lot more intrigue and interesting aspects of his game recently than some of the past Jets offensive coordinators. He does remind me some of Mike LaFleur, where you see the makings of a coordinator who is innovative, who is trying to move things forward, who's trying to do things differently, who's trying to out-scheme his opposition, other than just throwing your talent on the field and saying, hey, we're better than you and we're going to beat you because we're better than you. No. There's game planning and aspects of that involved as well. And I think you have some of that with Engstrand. Now, how is he going to evaluate how is he going to evaluate quarterbacks and develop quarterbacks? That's yet to be seen. We've got to see it, because in Detroit, Jared Goff went there and he's playing some really, really good football, but he was a really good quarterback with the Rams too. And then he just had a career renaissance again with the Lions, but he was still really, really good. He went to a Super Bowl with the Rams and Sean McVay. And so we haven't seen him. He obviously did not develop in any way, shape, or form Justin Fields. In fact, Fields looks like he's regressed under Engstrand and the Jets, but I would still be surprised if there's any coordinating change, especially on the offensive ranks. So it'll be Engstrand pioneering that quarterback development.
Connor, I feel like we need like a drum roll or like firecrackers going up because guess what? This question is
Hmm.
not about the quarterback situation.
Hell yeah, let's go.
I know, take
Non-quarterback
a deep
question. I like
breath.
it. Yeah.
Non-quarterback question, finally. This is from Jason Oki. Is there enough of a track record to show that GM Darren Muji will take flyers on cheap, young, unproven players with high upside compared to former GM Joe Douglas, who took flyers on great players past their prime, such as Ryan Khalil, which I forgot he played for the Jets, Tyron
Yeah.
Smith, Reddick, and Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I push back on that question because I don't think there's any accuracy to that whatsoever.
No, I
That
agree.
that was not what Joe Douglas did. Joe Douglas was the
No.
same person who found John Franklin Myers. Joe Douglas was the person who found Huff.
Vice yeah.
Joe Douglas was the same person who found countless other random players that ended up making a pretty good impact on the Jets. The players that were named there, with the exception of Khalil, because if you remember on Khalil, that was the off season where
I totally forgot
uh,
about him.
well, Mike McCagnon ran the training camp and he ran the entire draft and the entire free agency for the Jets is what Mike McCagnon did. And I remember when the season before ended, all of us and it was clear that Nick Mangold wasn't coming back. It all of us sat there and were like, "Well, the Jets need a center. Well, the Jets need a center. Well, the Jets need a center." And McCagnon was like, "No, I think we're just going to go with Jonathan Harrison." And it was like that doesn't seem like a smart idea at all. Like we know that guy can't play. And so when McCagnon was ultimately fired a couple weeks after the draft and Joe Douglas took over, he had to scramble a little bit to try to piecemeal some things together when he wasn't there for free agency and he wasn't there for the NFL draft. And Khalil, who was a huge Sam Darnold fan as a USC guy himself, Khalil basically said to the Jets, like, hey, I'm interested in playing again. And he tried to get in shape. And it was a total disaster, but that was kind of an anomaly. Those other players that are mentioned, Smith and Reddick and Aaron Rodgers, everyone and their uncle would take Aaron Rodgers. That was a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback that wanted
They
to come
did.
to the
Mike Tomlin
Jets.
took him.
Yeah. And the Jets were a complete and total disaster with Zach Wilson and believed they had a playoff Super Bowl ready roster. They just needed a quarterback, and that was the best possible option there in Rodgers. So I give him I absolve him of all blame there. And then the
And to
other
be
names
honest
that
with you,
you,
let's be realistic. It might have been he didn't blow his Achilles 4 plays into
correct.
that season. So
Yes.
we don't that's not fair.
Yes. And the other big thing, and then the other two names there that were mentioned in Tyron Smith and Reddick, that was ownership. That ownership wanted those guys. I know firsthand after the signing happened that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh were not fans of Tyron Smith, and I know that they did not want Reddick, but it was something that was advised to them that they make these additions and grab him. And specifically with Tyron Smith, I remember talking to Joe Douglas about this. He felt that with Tyron Smith, he was being used. That Tyron Smith and his agency were going to the Jets, having the Jets piece together a contract, and they were going to take it back to the Dallas Cowboys, and then the Dallas Cowboys were going to match whatever the Jets did. So Joe Douglas literally put together the most team-friendly game incentive contract in the world. That's what he did. He put it together basically believing that he was building a contract for the Dallas Cowboys and not wanting to get played. So every penny that Tyron Smith was going to make with the Jets, if he were to take the field, if he were to stay healthy, because again, this is another guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer. And he is a guy who, when he's on the field, is one of the best, if not the best, pass blocking left tackles to ever walk the face of the earth. The Jets put together a contract that was basically like, we're not paying you unless you play. That's how it was. That's how it was structured. They sent it over to him, and then Tyron Smith was like, "Okay, I'll take it." I remember like talking to people with the Jets, very high up with the Jets, who were like, "Yeah, we're not getting Tyron Smith. Yeah, Tyron Smith isn't happening. No way he takes this contract." And then Tyron Smith took the contract, so they took a chance on that one just because of the deal that made it worthwhile. They weren't financially hindered by that deal at all because everything was Smith only gets paid if he plays. He didn't play. He didn't really get paid. So I push back on that. You know, every Jet fan used to get annoyed about Joe Douglas in free agency because he was signing guys like that were in their 20s to just 3-year deals, banking on their upside, who maybe necessarily it wasn't. Remember, he wasn't the guy that was splashing around in the tier 1 of free agency. He was in the tier 2, tier 3, and he used to annoy fans more than anything else when he was signing guys like Corey Davis and Carl Lawson. And those things didn't work for a myriad of reasons, but it wasn't because he was signing guys that were over the hill or giving absurd contracts to players who were over the hill. So I don't believe in that whatsoever.
All right, Connor, we knew we were going to get a question on Breece Hall, and this
Yeah.
comes from a great name. My sports teams usually hurt me.
Yeah.
Wants to know. There's a lot of speculation on if Breece wants to stay in New York or not. Do you see the Jets extending him, tagging him, Or if they were to move on from him, could you see them drafting Jeremiah Love?
So Jeremiah Love, no, just because I think there's a chance that he goes very, very early in this year's draft. Now, anytime you're trying to figure out what guys who haven't done it before, how they're going to do it, you have to go back and look at their past history. And Aaron Glenn, when he was in Detroit, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round, and I think that paid off pretty well. I mean, the guy looks like one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the entire NFL. And Sean Payton, who worked pretty significantly with Darren Muji in Denver the last couple of years, Payton was somebody who drafted Mark Ingram in the first round and Reggie Bush in the first round a while ago, and both those players had really nice careers with the Saints. So I do think the Jets could draft running back in the first round, but top 10, top 12, that just seems kind of high. I don't think they're ready to do that just yet, considering the holes that are elsewhere on the roster and where they could easily put those assets to round it out. But Hall is such a fascinating one, Jeane. We've talked about this so
Now,
much over the last couple of years or a couple of weeks, because a month ago, I didn't think he was going to be with this team past the trade deadline. Now suddenly we're talking about him being with the team long term. And I think a big reason for that is because of the salary cap space that the Jets now have. You know, when they made the decision to trade away Sauce Gardner, when they made the decision to trade away Quinnen Williams, what they did was they freed up a ton of their future draft cap or future financial capital. So the Jets right now in 2026 are projected to have something like $100 million in salary cap space, with 70 something or about 75 million of it being effective cap, which is essentially salary cap, your cap space, what you have after your cap space with your projected what you have to pay your rookies that you're going to have in the draft class. Tagging Breece Hall is not going to make a dent in that. The Jets can still go absolutely buck wild in free agency, even after tagging with a franchise tag, forget transition tag, Breece Hall. They can also do something that's a little bit more financially responsible if they are worried about that cap space, and give Hall a 3-year contract extension. And you got to remember about Hall, I always forget this. The guy's only 24 years old.
I
So
know
if you
he's
give him
young.
if you give him a 3-year contract, by the time that contract's over, he's only 27, 28. So I do view this as an opportunity where Hall, who was completely cast aside, the Jets now have the luxury of giving him that 3-year contract, giving him that franchise tag, and keeping him as another piece within this offense. I don't think Hall is as good as we thought he was a couple years ago. I don't think he's a top 5 back, but he is probably a top 10, top 12 guy. I absolutely think he's that good. And if you're talking about an offensive line that's already pretty taken care of, needing a wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, but having the assets in the draft and free agent dollars to take care of that, you're going to draft a quarterback and throw him out there. Why not just keep the running back stable robust? Why not go into another year with Hall and Allen and Isaiah Davis as 1, 2, 3, and just continue to make life as easy as you possibly can on whatever quarterback you end up deciding to take? So I do think there's a chance he comes back, but it is also becoming very clear that Hall's priority is getting paid. And Hall's priority is getting a really nice contract this offseason. So if we do get to a point where financially it's just a number that the Jets don't want to go to, then maybe the tag makes a little more sense. But ultimately, I think the Jets and Hall can figure something out. And I've really come 180 on this with Hall and the opportunity and the possibility of him coming back to New York.
All right, Connor, you just mentioned that the Jets are looking for a wide receiver 2 and 3 behind the one, the only Garrett Wilson. Big Ed
Mhm.
wants to know, should Jets shut down Garrett Wilson for the season?
If you're going big picture, yeah, that makes sense. Shut him down and don't use him. I just don't think you can do that to Garrett. Garrett is
No.
such a different. He's
Competitor.
such a different guy. He's we live in a day and age of the diva receiver, and Garrett's very emotional. Like, absolutely, he's one of the more emotional players I've covered. But it's just because he wants to win so bad and he wants to be on the field so bad that when he's healthy and he can clear and pass all tests, I don't see, especially because this isn't a knee tear or anything like that, I don't see the Jets being able to keep Garrett Wilson out of the lineup. I genuinely do believe that. I think he's a guy that's going to have to be out there and want to be out there. And the Jets are ultimately going to have to put him back out there. And the other thing, too, to remember here, Jeane, is the Jets are winning a little bit. And I'm not saying, I know they're technically still alive in the playoffs. I'm not saying they're making a playoff run. But the Jets are starting to play some decent enough football where you kind of want Garrett Wilson to experience some of this winning, and you want him to be a part of some of these wins and make some plays. And I think that's something that you can do. So when he's healthy, I do think the Jets will probably put him out there unless something crazy happens over the next
And
couple
I'd
of weeks.
love to see him with Adonai and
Yeah,
John Mechie. I mean, I'd
how
love
they
to
all
see
work
that
together.
them
Yeah,
out there.
Yeah, because the one thing everybody always says about AD, and Glenn has said this over and over and over again, is he's a true X receiver. Garrett is not an X. In fact, when the old Jets regime and Mike LaFleur and all those guys drafted him, they believed he was best in the slot. And Nathaniel Hackett and those guys, Downing even used him a little bit in the slot. And then this year, the Jets were using him a lot in the slot because he's so shifty and he's so elusive that
Mm-hmm.
he can truly be a more athletic version of Cooper Kupp in his prime. What Cooper Kupp was able to do with the Rams, Garrett can be a more athletic, elusive version of that for the Jets in the slot. That's where they like him most. So if you get a chance to see how him and AD play together, AD out wide, Garrett in the slot, it kind of changes the target of the receiver that you're looking for next year because you're not going off of assumptions or your evaluations. You can actually physically see the tape of how these guys work together. And then you can go out there in free agency and look for a big bodied guy like a Jacoby Myers or something like that to be your other outside wide receiver with AD Mitchell and then Garrett in the slot or something like that when you look at the draft and who they could potentially target.
All right, Connor, this is our last question.
Okay.
And it's an interesting one. Okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
prepare you for that one. It's
Okay.
from King Pink.
Okay.
Hypothetically, get hypothetical questions right now.
Yes.
If Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh got fired this offseason and said they would 100% come to the Jets, would he fire Glenn? Sort of like the Vrabel Patriot situation last season.
It's a really good one.
I know, right? That's what I said.
I would say no. I don't think I honestly I don't know how much more I don't think Tomlin doesn't strike me as a guy that necessarily, and Zach Rosenblatt brought this up actually on Jets' final drive, is that he seems like when things are done with the Steelers, he might take some time away from the NFL and then decide if he wants to go back or not. I
Oh,
don't
I
know if
agree
he's
with
going to be
you.
one of those guys that is let go or fired or mutually part ways and then just goes and takes another job. I think he might take some time off before he decides he wants to coach again, if he ever wants to coach
Yeah, I
again.
was gonna say he might not even ever coach again. I could see that. Him being like, yeah,
Yeah,
we're good. I might
and
Tomlin.
and Harbaugh is a fascinating one, but there's some legitimate concerns there with him. I think he's a tremendous coach. I would hire him in a second, but there is something to be said that he's had a perennial candidate for the league MVP and Lamar Jackson, and they just haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs. And now they're having a real off year, and I know Lamar has missed some time, but I don't see anything from either of those two guys that would make me say, yeah, just immediately fire Aaron Glenn, but then still know that Woody Johnson's going to pay the close to $13 million a year that Aaron Glenn is making annually, that is entirely guaranteed for the next 4 years, to then also then pay a ton of money to the next head coach to come in. It just, there's too many moving parts there where I do genuinely believe the Jets want to see this one through for the next 2 or 3 years with Aaron Glenn. I don't think there's anything that's going to happen next year that would lead to him getting fired. I think he's absolutely going to see 3 years of this contract. And then the Jets will assess where things are with him and decide if they want to make a move. But no, and honestly, Janae, there's enough happening here at the tail end of the season
Hmm.
that makes you really encouraged for what's going on with Aaron Glenn. I mean, this team is
I agree with
woefully
you.
untalented. I mean, they are at such a significant talent disadvantage just about every single time they step on the field, but they are fighting, they are clawing, they're taking body blows and shots to the head, and they're not going down. They just keep getting back up and keep getting back up and keep getting back up. And I think that game against the Falcons is a pretty good indication of that, where they fall behind, they tie it, they fall behind, they tie it, they fall behind, they tie it, and then eventually they win it. I mean, that says a lot about the resiliency, and resiliency is a culture, and that's a result and a direct aspect and trait developed from your head coach. And I think that's what you're starting to see with Aaron Glenn. You were not seeing that with Gerard Mayo last year with the Patriots. I mean, that was just a disaster show with him
Yeah.
and so many red flags popping up and popping up and popping up that you then add in how tremendous of a coach Mike Vrabel is. And it was just a perfect storm of how to go to make a change and then go ahead and hire a new guy. I don't see the similarities there here with the Jets, where I genuinely believe that going into next year, there's probably no better option for this Jets team than Aaron Glenn. Like I genuinely want to see what
Hmm.
this guy can do moving forward next year with a little bit better talent. Like he's true. I tweeted this a little bit ago. Like I'm really coming around on him. I there was enough early on there, Janae, with Glenn, where I probably would have told you that the story sounds good. The first round pick from the Jets that had a really good career with the Jets coming back as a coach to turn it around. there was so much early on there during the 0-7 stretch, the way he was acting at press conferences, the way he was answering questions, some of the unjustified confidence in the way that he handled things, and the arrogance, that I was like, this is just, there's so many red flags. This is bound to be a failure. Like this is going to fail.
Mhm.
The way that things have turned really over the last 5 or 6 weeks with him and everything with him, even now the way that he's handling wins in press conferences, because how many times did we see the Jets win a game and they're beating their chests and so happy and all that stuff, and like they're acting like a meaningless win as a Super Bowl, and that's so not the case now with Glenn, where everything that he's doing, it seems like he's hitting all the right notes every single time, and I'm very encouraged of how this could look like once they add some more talent to the team. I am. I've really come around on him.
All right, I got one question. Sorry, Brian. Brian's our producer, and I haven't had a chance to write him in the thing. This is my question to you. Make
Yeah.
it quick because I think the food is out
Oh
waiting
yeah,
for
I'm
us.
hungry. Yeah.
Did you put your Christmas tree up? And if you did, are you a real or a fake guy?
Christmas tree's up. Yeah, we put the Christmas tree up a little bit before Thanksgiving, but that's because my wife is the most meticulous, detail-oriented woman in the entire world, and she everything needs to be
You can
perfect
tell by the
with
way
Brie.
you're dressed, but keep going.
Yeah, everything needs to be perfect with Brie, and like every I dotted, every T crossed. That's how she is. So we have been a real tree person forever. Like we have been real tree people for forever.
Yes, yeah.
This year was the first year we went fake, and part of that is because like
How are you feeling about that?
I was very upset because I'm very sentimental. Like the farm that we went to every single year, that's where I proposed to Bree. Like it was like very like sentimental for me to go there. We're a little worried about Brooke going over and yanking down a real tree. We're very worried about that. The maintenance of a real tree, setting it up, getting the lights on. I think I've talked about this. Like Bree's pregnant, so like we have like we're dealing with that. We're like now my wife is pregnant with a toddler, and it's just there's a little bit going on there where it's like we don't want to like add too much into the equation of like
And
things
she
that
has
can go
you.
wrong. Yeah, so there was just so many variables at play where we're like, you know what, this year let's go fake. And then my wife obviously spent like 6 months trying to figure out what the right fake tree would be. So once it came, she's like, I need to see it to make sure it's right, and we do. We absolutely love it. This hasn't been real quick, but we do have, my wife has a second tree. So we have the tree that we do in the family room, which is the big 9-10 footer that like we put all the lights on and decorate and all that stuff. My wife has her tree in the front of the room, and that's where she, you know, kind of lets her creativity and her design and all that stuff shine with that tree. Brooke and I are not allowed to touch it. That's just Bree's tree. That one's going to be a real one. So we're going to have the smaller real one in the living room, and then we'll have the fake one in the family room.
Okay. You can bring pictures next week.
We will. Yes, we will.
Okay, thanks for being real quick because now I think the food's gone. Anyways,
Okay.
thank you so much for watching this edition of Jets Mailbag. Like we said before, we will be with you every week of the Jets 2025 season to answer your questions. Submit your questions for next week's episode on mine, Connor's, or SNY's Twitter X account, or drop him here on the YouTube comment. We'll get them anywhere. For Connor Hughes, I'm Jeane Coakley. We will talk to you next week. And thanks, Brian, for putting that question up. Appreciate you.